Nestled deep within the dense woods of whispering pines stood an old abandoned cabin. Legend had it that the cabin was cursed, and no one who stayed the night ever returned the same. On a dare, 3 college friends, Jake, Sarah, and Emily, decided to spend a night there, seeking adventure and a good scare. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the trees, the trio made their way to the cabin. The air grew colder, and the forest seemed to whisper their names. "It's just the wind," Jake assured them, but unease settled in their hearts. The cabin was in a state of disrepair, with broken windows and creaking floors. They set up their sleeping bags in the main room, lighting a fire to ward off the chill. Sarah found an old journal, its pages yellowed with age. "Look at this," she said, opening it to read aloud. The journal belonged to a man named Thomas, who had lived there with his family. His entries started innocently enough, but quickly turned dark. He wrote about strange noises at night, whispers that grew louder, and shadows that moved on their own. The final entry was smeared with blood, ending abruptly with the words, "They're here." The fire flickered as a cold breeze swept through the room. Jake dismissed it as another draft, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. They decided to turn in for the night, hoping to laugh off their fears in the morning light. In the dead of night, Emily awoke to the sound of footsteps. At first, she thought it was one of her friends, but when she looked around, they were both fast asleep. The footsteps grew louder, echoing through the cabin. She nudged Jake awake. "Do you hear that?" Jake listened, his face growing pale. "It's probably just an animal," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. The footsteps stopped suddenly, followed by a low, guttural whisper. "Get out." The words sent chills down their spines. Sarah awoke to the sound of whispering voices surrounding her. She sat up, her heart pounding, and saw a shadowy figure standing at the foot of her sleeping bag. She screamed, waking the others. The figure vanished, leaving behind an oppressive silence. "We need to leave," Emily said, her voice trembling. Jake agreed, but Sarah insisted they stay. "It's just our imagination. We can't let fear get the best of us." Reluctantly, they stayed, though sleep eluded them. Hours passed, and the whispering returned, growing louder and more insistent. The shadows seemed to dance around them, taking on menacing forms. Jake grabbed a flashlight, shining it around the room, but it did little to dispel the darkness. Suddenly, the cabin door slammed open, and a gust of icy wind extinguished their fire. The room plunged into darkness. The whispering grew into a cacophony of voices, each more terrifying than the last. "Leave now, or face the consequences," one voice hissed. They gathered their things, scrambling to escape the cabin. As they reached the door, the floorboards creaked ominously, and they felt unseen hands pushing them back. The door slammed shut, trapping them inside. Emily felt a hand grip her ankle, pulling her down. She screamed, kicking at the invisible force. Jake and Sarah pulled her up, but the whispers turned into screams, filling the room with a deafening roar. Desperation set in as they realized they were trapped. Jake found an old iron cross in a drawer and held it up, shouting, "Leave us alone!" The whispers ceased, and the shadows retreated, but the air remained thick with malevolence. They bolted from the cabin as the first light of dawn broke through the trees. They never spoke of that night again, but each bore the scars of their encounter. Whispering Pines stood as a grim reminder of the horrors that lurked within the woods, waiting for the next unwary souls to cross its threshold. Blackwood Cabin was infamous among the locals for its dark history. Built in the 1800s by a reclusive family, it was said to be the site of numerous tragedies and mysterious disappearances. Despite the warnings, Mike, Lisa, and Tom decided to spend a weekend there, drawn by the cabin's eerie allure. As they approached the cabin, the forest seemed to close in around them. The trees whispered in the wind, and the sky darkened ominously. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Lisa asked, her voice shaky. Mike laughed it off, saying it was all part of the adventure. The cabin was surprisingly well preserved, with sturdy walls and a solid roof. They settled in, exploring the various rooms. In the attic, Tom found an old, dusty mirror covered with a black cloth. "Check this out," he said, pulling the cloth away. The mirror was ornate, with strange symbols etched around its frame. Lisa felt a chill as she looked into it, seeing her reflection distorted and shadowy. "Put it back," she said, unnerved. Tom shrugged and covered the mirror again. That night, they sat around the fireplace, telling ghost stories. The wind howled outside, and the fire cast eerie shadows on the walls. Lisa felt uneasy, sensing something watching them from the darkness. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. A faint tapping sound echoed through the cabin, like fingernails on wood. Mike dismissed it as tree branches, but the tapping grew louder and more insistent. They followed the sound to the attic where the mirror stood uncovered. "I thought I covered it," Tom said, confused. As they approached, the tapping stopped. The mirror's surface rippled, and a ghostly face appeared, its eyes hollow and mouth open in a silent scream. They stumbled back in terror. The mirror's face spoke, its voice a low, mournful wail. "You should not have come here. The curse binds us all." The cabin shook, and the temperature dropped. They ran downstairs, but the door refused to budge. Trapped, they huddled together, fear gripping their hearts. The ghostly figure from the mirror materialized before them, its form flickering like a dying flame. "You must break the curse," it said, reaching out with skeletal hands. Mike found an old journal under a floorboard, detailing the cabin's tragic history. The family that built it had dabbled in dark magic, summoning spirits that turned on them. The mirror was a portal, trapping souls within it. "We need to destroy the mirror," Tom said, but the ghost shook its head. "It's not that simple. The curse must be lifted by undoing the ritual that binds us." The journal contained the ritual, written in a language none of them understood. Desperation set in as the spirits grew more restless, their wails filling the cabin. Lisa spotted a key phrase in the journal, something that looked like an incantation. She began to read it aloud, her voice shaking. The spirits screamed, their forms twisting and writhing in agony. The cabin trembled as Lisa continued the incantation. The mirror shattered, and a blinding light filled the room. The spirits faded, their voices echoing one last time. The curse was broken, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. The cabin door creaked open, allowing them to escape into the dawn. They left the cabin behind, vowing never to return. Blackwood Cabin stood as a silent witness to the horrors that had transpired. The townsfolk noticed a change, the dark presence lifting from the woods. But the memory of that cursed place lingered, a reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. Deep in the heart of Ravenwood Forest lay a cabin shrouded in mystery and fear. The locals spoke of it in hushed tones, recounting tales of lost souls and restless spirits. Drawn by the thrill of the unknown, Anna, Mark, and Brian decided to spend a night there. The journey to the cabin was fraught with unease. The forest seemed alive, with every rustle and creak amplifying their anxiety. As they neared the cabin, the trees grew denser and the light dimmed, casting eerie shadows on the path. The cabin was a decrepit structure, its walls covered in moss and ivy. They entered cautiously, the air inside heavy and stale. An old grandfather clock stood in the corner, its hands frozen at midnight. "Creepy," Anna muttered. They set up camp in the main room, lighting candles for warmth and light. Mark found an old photograph album, its pages filled with images of a family from a bygone era. "Looks like they just vanished," he said, flipping through the pages. As night fell, the temperature dropped and the wind howled outside. They huddled around a makeshift fire, telling stories to pass the time. Anna felt a chill, as if unseen eyes were watching her every move. The clock struck midnight, its chimes echoing through the cabin. The candles flickered, casting unsettling shadows on the walls. A faint whispering filled the room, barely audible but unmistakable. "Did you hear that?" Brian asked. The whispering grew louder, coming from all directions. They followed the sound to a trapdoor in the floor. Mark pried it open, revealing a dark, narrow staircase leading down into the basement. "Should we go down?" Anna asked, her voice trembling. Against their better judgment, they descended into the basement, the air growing colder with each step. The basement was filled with old furniture and cobwebs. In the corner, they found an old, dusty piano, its keys broken and discolored. Suddenly, the piano played a haunting melody on its own, the notes echoing through the room. The whispering intensified, and they saw ghostly figures materialize around them. "Help us!" the spirits cried, their faces contorted in agony. The spirits revealed their tragic story. The family that once lived there had been tormented by dark forces. Desperate to escape, they performed a ritual that backfired, trapping their souls in the cabin. The spirits needed the ritual to be undone to find peace. Mark found an old book of spells hidden in a chest. The pages were filled with arcane symbols and instructions for reversing the ritual. "We need to do this," he said, determination in his eyes. The spirits guided them, their voices filled with hope and despair. They gathered the necessary ingredients: salt, candles, and an ancient amulet found in the basement. As they prepared, the spirits grew restless, the air thick with anticipation. Anna began the incantation, her voice steady despite the fear gripping her heart. The cabin shook violently, and the spirits screamed, their forms flickering like dying flames. The dark presence that had tormented them materialized, a shadowy figure with glowing red eyes. "You cannot undo what has been done," it hissed. Brian held up the amulet, its light piercing the darkness. The shadowy figure recoiled, its form unraveling. Anna continued the incantation, the words flowing with newfound strength. The spirits joined in, their voices merging with hers. With a final, earth-shattering scream, the dark presence was banished, and the spirits found their peace. The cabin returned to its lifeless state, the air clearing. They emerged into the dawn, forever changed by their encounter. Ravenwood Cabin remained, a silent sentinel to the tormented souls who once called it home, their story a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurks in the woods.